Good morning, world builders. It is your host, Annalise, the founder and operator of Common Healing, a boutique travel company that focuses on group trips to Africa and beyond. I am here for the second episode of Good Morning, World Builders, which is very unplanned, is very on a whim, and is very just happening. And I'm along for the ride. I'm hoping to get this out to you by morning. I had already recorded this and then the audio wasn't good. So I figured, let me set up these mics that I got for Christmas and redo this recording. So this may be a good afternoon, world builders. But anyway, in order for me to talk about the origin story of common healing, I would like to start by reading a book. And it is called Westlandia by Paul Fleischman. Of course he's miserable, moaned Wesley's mother. He sticks out like a nose, snapped his father. Listening through the heating vent, Wesley knew they were right. He was an outcast from the civilization around him. He alone in his town disliked pizza and soda, alarming his mother and the school nurse. He found professional football stupid. He'd refused to shave half his head, the hairstyle worn by all the other boys despite his father's bribe of $5. Passing his neighborhood's 2 stories of housing, garage on the left and garage on the right, Wesley alone dreamed of more exciting forms of shelter. He had no friends, but plenty of tormentors. Fleeing them was the only sport he was good at. Each afternoon, his mother asked him what he'd learned in school that day. That seeds are carried great distances by the wind, he answered on Wednesday. That each civilization has its staple food crop, he answered on Thursday. That school's over and I should find a good summer project, he answered on Friday. As always, his father mumbled, I'm sure you'll use that knowledge often. Suddenly, Wesley's thoughts shot sparks. His eyes blazed. His father was right. He could actually use what he'd learned that week for a summer project that would top all the others. He would grow his own staple food crop and found his own civilization. The next morning, he turned over a plot of ground in his yard. That night, a wind blew in from the west. It raced through the trees and set his curtains snapping. Wesley lay awake, listening. His land was being planted. 5 days later, the first seedlings appeared. You'll have almighty bedlam on your hands if you don't get those weeds out, warned his neighbor. Actually, that's my crop, replied Wesley. In this type of garden, there are no weeds. Following ancient tradition, Wesley's fellow gardeners grew tomatoes, beans, Brussels sprouts, and nothing else. Wesley found it thrilling to open his land to chance, to invite the new and unknown. The plants shot up past his knees, then his waist. They seemed to be all of the same sort. Wesley couldn't find them in any plant book. Are those tomatoes, beans, or Brussels sprouts? Asked Wesley's neighbor. None of the above, replied Wesley. Fruit appeared, yellow at first, then blushing to magenta. Wesley picked one and sliced through the rind to the juicy purple center. He took a bite and found the taste an entrancing blend of peach, strawberry, pumpkin pie, and flavors he had no name for. Ignoring the shelf of cereals in the kitchen, Wesley took to breakfasting on the fruit. He dried half a rind to serve as a cup, built his own squeezing device, and drank the fruit's juice throughout the day. Pulling up a plant, he found large tubers on the roots. These he boiled, fried, or roasted on the family barbecue, seasoning them with a pinch of the plant's highly aromatic leaves. It was hot work tending to his crop. To keep off the sun, Wesley wove himself a hat from strips of the plant's woody bark. His success with the hat inspired him to devise a spinning wheel and loom on which he wove a loose-fitting robe from the stalk's soft inner fibers. Unlike jeans, which he found scratchy and heavy, the robe was comfortable, reflected the sun, and offered myriad opportunities for pockets. His schoolmates were scornful, then curious. Grudgingly, Wesley allowed them 10 minutes apiece at his mortar, crushing the plant seeds to collect the oil. The oil had a tangy scent and served him both as suntan lotion and mosquito repellent. He rubbed it on his face each morning and sold small amounts to his former tormentors at the price of $10 per bottle. What's happened to your watch? Asked his mother one day. Wesley admitted that he no longer wore it. He told time by the stock that he used as a sundial and had divided the day into 8 segments. the number of petals on the plant's flowers. He's adopted a new counting system as well, based likewise upon the number 8. His domain, home to many such innovations, he named Westlandia. Uninterested in traditional sports, Wesley made up his own. These were designed for a single player and used many different parts of the plant. His spectators looked on with envy. Realizing that more players would offer him more scope, Wesley invented other games that would include his schoolmates, games rich with strategy and complex scoring systems. He tried to be patient with the other players' blunders. August was unusually hot. Wesley built himself a platform and took to sleeping in the middle of Westlandia. He passed the evenings playing a flute he'd fashioned from a stalk or gazing up at the sky, renaming the constellations. His parents noted Wesley's improved morale. It's the first time in years he's looked happy, said his mother. Wesley gave them a tour of Westlandia. What do you call this plant? Asked his father. Not knowing its name, Wesley had begun calling it Swist, from the sound of its leaves rustling in the breeze. In like manner, he'd named his new fabrics, games, and foods until he'd created an entire language. Mixing the plant's oil with soot, Wesley made a passable ink. As the finale to his summer project, he used the ink and his own 80-letter alphabet to record the history of his civilization's founding. In September, Wesley returned to school. He had no shortage of friends. A few years ago in December, I was telling my mom about this idea for embodied world building, which I'd drawn from speculative fiction more broadly, but particularly a masterclass with N.K. Jemisin, where she provides world building as a technique and a tool for compelling science fiction. And while I was watching this, I couldn't and moving through the practice of constructing this world, I could not help but think about how if we can build new worlds in our writing, can't we bring those new worlds to life? And I operate from a spiritual belief system that we what we see on the outside is what's on the inside, and the reality that we're creating outside is a mirror and is reflective of what's going on the inside. And we can step into sensations and energetics of where we want to go before we're there, and then that's how we usher in these new realities. And in this place of pretty deep disillusionment with the cooperative development work I'd been doing for a number of years, I got really excited and really inspired by the idea of embodied world building and creating spaces where we could simulate the futures of our dreams and we could practice them and we could experiment with intentional living. It was a few years ago in December. I was telling my mom about embodied world building and this idea and this practice that I wanted to pursue through my experience production. And my mom goes, "Oh, like the book you used to love as a kid." I was like, "What are you talking about?" She's like, "You don't remember?" I said, "No." And she jogged her memory to remember the name of the book. And then when she said Westlandia, it started to come to me. So I looked it up and I watched a reading of it on YouTube, and then I started remembering. But my mom shared with me that when I was 6, when I was in first grade, I was so into this book, and I was telling my great aunt about it, and she was a first grade teacher. So she bought a copy for her class. I guess I wrote her a letter about it, or she wrote me a letter about it. It was deep. I was so into this book. Last year, my mom actually mailed me a copy of the book shortly after Auntie Ellie passed away. And that was one of the stories that was shared after her funeral. My mom was crying and just sharing how connected me and Auntie Ellie were at that moment through that. And I just think it's really cool how the adults in our life can really nurture what's seemingly a small interest in a child. But here I am 25 years later, 23 years later, completely dedicating my life to world building as a practice. And after me being 6, there was a lot of different experiences in my life that also led me to this point, a lot of which you can read on the About page on the website, www.commonhealing.org. I think it's slash about. So I won't get into that too much here. I think there's a lot of wisdom in what we're drawn to as a child and what lights us up and excites us as a child, because we haven't learned shame, or we haven't learned as much shame as we do by the time we're adults. We're not as programmed. We're not as hurt. And so we're the most us until we get back to that point as adults, if we're on a healing spiritual journey. But I find a lot of truth in what children were drawn to, because there's other evidence. There's me building doll houses and Bratz malls and Polly Pocket towns. And my favorite part of playing was actually setting up the town and setting up the mall or the dollhouse and creating the container and creating the structure that the play and the life, the imagined reality happens within. And my sister, bless her, I have memories. I would just say, Taya, I gotta set it up. I gotta set it up. And she would most of the time be really patient and just wait. And then she'd be annoyed because by the time I was done setting up 4 hours later, um, I wouldn't want to play anymore. Like I'd played, that was my play. And I also have this memory, and I actually think it's on like home video, where she was probably like two, if that, and I would have been like 3 or 4, and just her baby hand like coming through the window of the dollhouse and her just like messing up everything that I'd set up. Um, but yeah, I think as I'm speaking, I'm just seeing the work that I'm dedicated to now showing itself from a really young age. And that's affirming to me. That tells me that I'm on the right path or something. And there's a really cool African proverb that says, if you know the beginning, then the end will not trouble you. And so looking back to younger me, also looking back at my ancestors' legacies, like my grandmother, which I also speak to a bit on the website, I think helps fill in the blanks. It helps bring meaning, it helps bring purpose. Legacy is really important to me. So I found a lot of solace in looking back. Since its inception, Common Healing has been a space that reflects back to me where I'm at. And it's also become this place where all these seemingly disparate parts of myself come together in this full expression through curating these travel experiences. I'm just doing what I've always done, or at least since I was 17, which is travel mostly solo and make friends in these other places. And these friendships are lasting and real, and then weave into the fabric of my life this necessity for travel. So travel isn't this thing I have to set goals around or very intentionally bring into life or carve out space for. Most other facets of my life have to fit around travel. But in traveling mostly solo for the last 10 years, 10, 11 years, I've reached this place where I really want to share that with other people. When I was younger, I wasn't going to wait for other people to travel with. I just didn't think too much. And if the opportunity arose or if a desire arose, I just went for it. But I am really desiring to share these experiences with people. And so curating these group trips gives me the opportunity to show people this way of travel that's very rooted in relationships, not only with the people that you meet in these places and these destinations, but with the land that you walk on as well. Through Common Healing, I feel as though I am in pursuit of connecting with my world building kin across the world. There's a bunch of us. We're this cohort of visionary people, optimistic people, principled people who are clear on their politic but not drowning in critique, but have actually integrated critical thought and bring that into their praxis and live in alignment with the futures and the belief systems that they speak on. And my hope through these group trips is other people make friends and connect, and they generate all of the things that come from meeting new people and connecting. There's a quote from Malcolm X, and I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially speaks to the power of connecting across the diaspora and back with the continent, and how if we understood our mass, no one could stop us. And while common healing trips, they're curated. So some spaces are open regardless of identity. Some spaces are for femmes. Some spaces are for people of the African diaspora. But now that I feel as though we've built a solid foundation and we've made it clear who is centered in these experiences, I feel like we can start to open up the space. And again, they're curated. So there are still going to be spaces that are exclusive for various people of various identities. But I'm also really intending on having some multicultural spaces as well that also represent the full spectrum of gender. While at different points of my life, I've operated from more of a separatist take. I am half white and I grew up in white environments, and I feel I have this capacity to be a bridge and to make connection, because in my own body, different identities come together. And going forward, I really want to step into that role. How can we be honest about power? And how can we shift power? How can we move resources through this new interconnected network of friends that we are seeding through these group trips? So that's just some of the inquiries that I'm sitting with. And I'd love to hear what y'all think about that. I'd love to hear if people look to common healing for racially exclusive spaces. I'd like to hear if people are interested and curious about multiracial, multicultural spaces. So yeah, let me know. I think I'm going to leave it there for now. It's fully morning for me. I've had a meeting, but I haven't showered, I haven't done my hair. I kind of like this space being somewhere I can just pull up, though. But I kind of like having the space where I can just show up as I am in that moment to deliver whatever message is coming through, and without overthinking it, without thinking about my presentation or self. And I think that's what's going to make this space sacred for me and make me want to keep pulling up. So thank you for listening. That's a wrap for episode 2 of Good Morning World Builders. I got about an hour and 10 minutes to get this out to y'all before it's not morning anymore, but we got a lot rolling out over the next few weeks. Thanks for being here.